Hazezon Tamar is a 2/4 legend that costs 4 generic and a red and a green and a white mana, for a total casting cost of 7. On your next upkeep after Hazezon is put into play, put star token Sand Warriors into play, where star is the number of lands under your control. Treat the warriors as 1/1 white, green, and red creatures. If Hazezon leaves play, all Sand Warriors are also removed from the game. So that's really interesting, and Hazezon arguably has the first ever enters the battlefield trigger, but it is a delayed trigger, and all that together is kinda funny. This is one of the few legendary creatures in Legends that has an ability that makes you want to build around it. This card is not good, unfortunately. It costs 7 mana, which is tough, but to be fair, you do want a shitload of lands out before you play this card anyway, so I guess that's not the hugest deal. The real issue is that Hazezon needs to stay on the battlefield for a turn cycle, and everyone is going to know what's about to happen, so there's generally a lot of motivation to remove Hazezon. You also lose all your tokens if Hazezon is removed after you get through a turn cycle. So this plan requires 2 whole turn cycles before you can even do anything, and that is a tall ask. You can get around the whole Sand Warriors getting removed from play when Hazezon is removed if you specifically remove Hazezon from the battlefield after its delay trigger hits the stack but before it resolves, as that will cause the Exile All Sand Warriors trigger to hit the stack, and then that will resolve first, so then your sand tokens will come into play and Hazezon will not be in play, and so him being removed won't remove the Sand Warriors since he's already gone. That is kind of cool, but it's just an extra step in this plan that's basically a house of cards. I really like this ability, and I think it's a super fun and interesting win condition, but it definitely isn't that strong of a card. It is probably pretty fun in low power 1v1, since you only have one opponent to deal with, and that opponent has half the life as they do in like Commander, so this is it's less of a tall ask to be able to field enough lands to win that way than it would be in a Commander game. I do think that regardless of where you're playing this is just really cool though. There is also Jacques Lever, a 3/2 that costs 4 mana that gives all your green creatures +0/+2. That makes a Jacques a 3/4 because he himself is a green creature. That card is also pretty good and a fairly interesting build around. And then there's of course Johan, a 6 mana 5/4 that gives all your other creatures vigilance if he doesn't attack. Interestingly, both of these cards are pretty good in a Hazezon deck since they both affect the Sand Warriors. But my main point here is that the 3 Naya legends that aren't an Elder Dragon are pretty solid to build around, which I think is interesting. What do you guys think of Hazezon Tamar? It's pretty interesting, right? Overall, I think it's pretty obvious this card isn't strong, but I do think this card is really fun and interesting, and could have been strong if it didn't take 2 turns of not being fucked with to swing in with like 8 1/1 tokens. Still, I find myself wishing more of the legendary creatures would have been as creative or like build-aroundy as Hazezon was. I think cards like this are what make Legends such a weird and cool set. But let's talk about the art and get on with our day, shall we? Hazezon Tamar was illustrated by Richard Kane Ferguson, and this art is banger. Richard always does a great job, and this one is no exception. The line work is pretty solid, and I really appreciate how the line work fades the more into the background you get. It kinda helps provide a sense of depth, which I think is really cool. The details themselves are really solid. I really like the sick-ass sword Hazezon is wielding, and the red sky and orange sun in the background are just super fucking cool. I really like this piece a lot. I think it's well done and truly cool to look at. It has just enough detail to be pretty interesting to look at for like a minute or two, which is nice. It's kind of cool if your card takes a second to like really grasp. Yeah, I don't know. I like this card. I think it's fun and interesting and a pretty cool concept. The art is also really nice, but here's where I turn it to you guys. What are your thoughts on Hazezon? If you want to share them, that is. Otherwise, you can like the video if you liked it. You can subscribe if you give a shit. But either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thank you for watching.